we go. Super happy to have Debbie here again this week, and we're going to talk more about Prodependence. I don't know what even the topic is today, so I'm excited to hear. I always take lots of notes and share your webinars. So for those of you that are here live, thank you for joining us. Please remember, you are welcome to ask questions about the topic or anything else, betrayal trauma, Prodependence, sex addiction, relationships. So please type your questions in the Q&A and we will get to them after the first segment. So I'm going to mute and turn it over to you, Debbie.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And as I mention every time we meet, I'm always aware of what's going on as far as with the women in my groups, with my clients that come in, and what presents. And the past couple of weeks, it's been really interesting to watch what betrayal trauma does to attachment. So I thought it would be really good today to talk about what are the needs of the betrayed partner in order for them to feel safe and secure and that they can move towards their partners. Also, as I've talked with the women who are recovering from betrayal trauma, they easily identify what it is they need for safety. So I'm going to just add a little section today for the betraying partners, those that have the addiction, and some things that they can do if they want to create connection. Besides focusing, on what people bring into me, because I want it to be very applicable, I've also been noticing that there's a bit of a trend out there in betrayal trauma recovery. And to me, it promotes disconnection, where we see addict partners portrayed as abusers. And certainly there are situations where that's the case, but I don't believe that it should be used as a blanket statement. There is, with Prodependence, we're looking at it from that whole attachment perspective, which I love because it makes in my brain so much sense. It helps me to understand not only what happens in the betrayal, but it also gives me a roadmap on how to repair the betrayal and create connection. So I love Prodependence because to me, it comes from that angle of hope. It's also about connection. And to me, it's much more positive in the midst of things that are so devastating and so difficult. So some of the things that women will say to me, and I even asked myself when I had betrayal, was, why does this betrayal trauma hurt so much? Why does it feel like, my whole world is blown up? Even the insides of me feel like it's so disorganized and I have no idea who I am or how I feel anymore, or what I'm supposed to do next. How does something like this take me from one day I'm feeling safe and secure in a relationship to the next day, either with discovery or disclosure, all of a sudden I'm in the depths of despair, I'm in the middle of a crisis. So one of the things that we are going to talk about just in the first little bit is, what happens to the brain when all of a sudden this happens, because I believe that explains why all of a sudden one day we're okay, we have this information regarding the attachment of our relationship, and the next day we're in crisis. Remember that the brain is there. Its number one role is to keep us alive. It's survival. So whether it runs the internal body systems, in our bodies, or it's scanning our environment looking for danger, those are the two major roles it has. So when betrayal occurs, when we get this information, all of a sudden we have this disruption, this disconnection in that secure attachment that you had. So what the brain does is it starts to take in the data and it starts recognizing the partner's experiences. So the betrayed partner, what I thought was going on with my partner isn't what I thought was going on. So they start working out of the hippocampus of their brain. To me, that's like the file system of their brain. They go back into the files and they start looking back at, last March when I thought that we were on this family vacation and we were having this wonderful time, best vacation ever. Come to find out he was sexting other women, when we were all asleep. So now what happens is the partner is in that part of the brain trying to sort out and connect and to figure out how to almost, in essence, reorder, reconfigure, redefine the data that's been filed away in the brain. That's why you see betrayed partners oftentimes talking about, I can't get certain times of my life or certain events or experiences with my partner out of my mind. I keep going back and playing it over and over in my mind. Also, when we're in trauma, the body and the brain has to metabolize the trauma. And what happens in order to do that is we go limbic, the amygdala starts firing. And the interesting thing about being in that limbic part of our brain with the amygdala's firing is not only is it because we're seeing external triggers, we're seeing maybe how our betraying partner's acting, but the internal triggers, what I'm thinking. So think about it. If I'm in my hippocampus trying to reorder things, trying to make sense of what's going on, right? That can be an eternal trigger as well. And so I've got my brain is just firing and it's telling me basically, you're under threat. Life isn't safe. Your partner is no longer safe. You are no longer secure in this relationship. And so in those early days, especially the early months, the betrayed partner really is operating out of that survival part of their brain. So let's talk about what happens when all of a sudden you've got this event that happens, right? Where there is the betrayal, either it's through discovery or disclosure. We are all wired as human beings for attachment. This really is about survival. We need relationships to survive. We need caretakers and those people that are there to help us meet our needs in the early days of our life. And then as we move into romantic relationships, we also need people to be able to turn to. And that connection with other human beings is just as important as food, air, and water. And so when we look at it that way, it helps us to understand why it's so important that we hold on to a connection with other people. We connect with other people because it also gives us a sense of wholeness. So at times I feel life is easier. I can tackle life when I've got somebody there supporting me and helping me. My life feels more fulfilled when I am connecting with other people. So when our attachment is threatened, we will do whatever we need to do to hold on to our attachment object. That's where the safety seeking comes in. So let me give you an example. I find in the early stages of betrayal, when women come in to see me, they really want to almost direct their partner's recovery and how it looks. That's their safety seeking. So it's, I need to make sure you're doing your dailies, and I'm going to make sure that, you report to me every night if you did your dailies that day. Or they might go in and they might make their appointments, the betraying partner's appointments with their therapist, because they want to make sure that they get in, because they want that repair. They want to know that their partner's safe and secure. And so when we look at the behaviors that a betraying partner goes into, right, we look at it through those prodependence lenses of, this is about safety seeking. This is about trying to repair. And it's my best attempts at that moment at repairing the relationship. And as women work through recovery, and men who have been betrayed, you find that they step out of some of those early behaviors that they did that were really a lot more controlling. And again, I look at it through those lenses of, hey, this partner is just trying to create safety. And is there maybe a healthier way we can do it? So oftentimes I will challenge in a very gentle way some of those betrayed partners with, as you're doing your healing, this is kind of where we hope to get you. And that is where you can let him make his appointments. And if he doesn't, then what are you going to do to be okay? And at that point, the betrayed partner has the skills and tools necessary to know how to take care of themselves. So like I said, once this betrayal takes place, the betrayed partner no longer feels safe to turn to their romantic partner for connection. And so I hear women and men who have been betrayed say things like, gosh, the person who I thought had my back is no longer safe. Now, who am I going to turn to? Then they'll come in and they'll say, a part of me really hates my partner. I'm so angry. I am so fearful of them. They disgust me. But yet there's a part of me that I still love my partner. I want to move towards them. And I even have had some partners betrayed partners recently say to me that they feel guilty and shame because they want to move towards their partners. And there's some part of their brain that's going, no, 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 they betrayed you. And so I've really been working with them regarding connection. And, sometimes we do feel safe enough to move towards our partner and connect. So can we step out of the shame and into some self-compassion in those moments? Because remember, part of the repair is that we go in and we make attempts. Sometimes they work. And when they work, we can repeatedly go in and continue to repair the disconnection. So a lot of the questions that also come up once there is betrayal and there's this disruption in the attachment, it is things like, are you really there for me? Can I move towards you? Are you safe? Do I really matter? Do you really care? Are you there when you need me? And I do find that betrayed partners are sometimes a little bit hyper focused on that at first, because remember, their world's been turned upside down, and then it gets triggered fairly easily along their recovery journey. So remember, the brain's there. The function is to make sure you're safe and that you stay alive. And so at times when you see certain behaviors that might indicate, oh my gosh, my partner is not in recovery, we go back into that questioning once again. So what I love about Prodependence is how it defines attachment. It talks about attachment as being healthfully interdependent. I love that. We're working together. I love it where they talk about where one person's strengths support the vulnerabilities of the other and vice versa. And with this mutual support, it's happening just spontaneously, automatically. There's no questioning. So we show up for each other. And that's what we have to start working on repairing and redoing. So I love how Prodependence looks at, attachment and this disruption in attachment so differently. I love that it celebrates the fact that, even the caretaker, when they step in and they might not be doing the most healthy behaviors, that we're looking at it through that loved one's willingness to step in to try to stay connected and somehow support a repair. And so part of the journey along the way in the betrayed partner's recovery is to figure out what skills and tools really are healthy and the ones that work for their situation and their relationship. I love the fact that there's no shame or blame. There's no sense of, gosh, you did that. You are wrong for doing that. You are somehow enabling that person who's got the addiction, but rather we're not gonna, pathologize that what that betrayed partner is doing as something that's bad. Right? I just love the verbiage when I work with my clients and with women in groups, and that is, well, that's one way to handle it. I'm wondering if there's a healthier way that you might approach it. And we sometimes talk about the outcome when they handled it the way they did. Was it what they wanted? Were they getting what they hoped to get? And sometimes when they recognize that, it just took me down into some of my trauma responses even deeper, I went down the rabbit hole, then that's when we start to explore, okay, what are some other ways that you might be able to handle this? I love the fact that we recognize that the betrayed partner's efforts are about connection. And it's not because they're sick, they're broken, it's that they want to make sure their partner is safe and secure. And the other thing about Prodependence and attachment I love is that the focus really is on hope and on the healing, that this wounding can be repaired and that we can provide through the Prodependence lenses a lot of helpful and healthy, skills and tools to help you get there. And I know Matt Wheeler does a lot of the attachment focused stuff for couples on the webinars on Fridays. So that would be a great source along with all the other wonderful, webinars that they have on this at Sex and Relationship Healing. So in those early days, if you feel like you don't have hope, my recommendation is drop in to all those types of webinars, because lots of times it's hearing what we can do and how the repair is made that's going to be very, very helpful in holding on to hope because I know in those early days of betrayal trauma, and my own experience was I felt very hopeless and powerless. And so sometimes just hearing ideas kind of supported me in my early stages of healing. Okay. The thing is that when we do the recovery work in attachment, that it does take two people. And so what I'm going to talk about right now is those cases where both partners are in recovery. I know that's not always the case in a situation. And we'll do a webinar on what to do if your partner isn't in recovery or your partner's choosing to step out of the relationship. But for today, we're going to talk about what each partner can do and apply and practice in their day-to-day life to help with the repair. So I want to focus first of all on the addict betraying partner. Because I think it's really important. Here's what the women who come in and I work with tell me. One of the things that they want is they want acknowledgement of the attachment injury. Please take accountability. Please recognize that your behaviors created this in me. And oftentimes, if they just hear their partners verbally say that, the one that's betrayed, then it helps calm them down. They feel much more secure. And oftentimes the addict partner has to say it a lot and take accountability. And it can be not only for the overall addiction, but sometimes it's moment to moment. It might be that the addict, all of a sudden their shame came up and they got really defensive. And it's being able in that moment to recognize, you know what, my shame came up. I got really defensive with you. To me, that's also acknowledgement, because in that moment when we're in our shame, it can cause disruption and it causes disconnection when we are really trying to connect. The other thing is answer any questions that the betrayed partner will ask with openness and honesty and transparency. Now, I'm going to give you some guidelines on this because that's not always the case. Sometimes in the early stages of betrayal, it can be more damaging. And so that's why you do want to get in and see people who are qualified to help with betrayal trauma. Because my recommendation, saw a client this last week that she's wanting to go in and ask a lot of questions. And we are working on formal disclosure. So I challenged her to write her questions down rather than asking them, to bring them into her sessions, to make them part of the disclosure. And then we talked about how do you sit in the discomfort of not being able to ask the question in the moment. Now, there are some that need to be asked. I get that. And sometimes they slip through, and I never get after my clients if they go against my suggestion, right? They're just trying to create safety and security. But I'm finding that if the partner will, without, hesitation, the addict partner will just provide the information, checking in with their partner to make sure that the betrayed partner is able to hear it. So we need to make sure we're well fed, well rested, both people are grounded. Maybe we ask, what specific question do you have? And answer just very short questions. And if anybody gets triggered, we stop. So in those early days, in the early stages when we're in crisis, oftentimes I challenge the betrayed partners, hold on to your questions if you can, right? Or we work in session on, okay, how can you approach your partner and get this information so that you can stay grounded and it doesn't throw you in crisis. Okay. The other thing is, if the addict partner will actively do their recovery work and share their progress with the betrayed partner, makes all the difference in the world. So the women will say to me, I see him going to group, or gosh, he just went in and he scheduled all of his appointments with his therapist for the next 3 months. He's going every 2 weeks. Or gosh, I see him working on his workbooks. And one client came in this last week and said, yeah, there was one section in his workbook, he actually had me read it because he wanted my input on it. And I thought, gosh, that's great. I mean, that creates right there connection in that moment. Initiate and participate in check-ins. If your partner needs a check-in, and I do encourage that we do simple check-ins once to twice a week. And I give a format that I like, and we do it very similar to a group check-in. And we try to make it about connection. So it's sharing how we're feeling emotionally, physically, spiritually, and relationally. I like the partners to share what they're currently working on in their recovery work so that, you're not in the dark and wondering what work you're each doing. Sometimes I tell my clients, share what you're learning. Maybe there's something you had an aha moment, share that. Maybe you have a specific need that you want to share. So for the betrayed partner, it might be this week for safety, I need. Or the betraying partner might say, this week for support, here's what I need. And seeing if you can show up for each other. So I really encourage clients and the betraying partners to really work on check-ins. I find when I do couples work that those couples that are doing check-ins and they have found what works for them and they keep them short. If we've got something longer to discuss, do it later at a different time, maybe later in the day, the next night, whatever. If they will do that, it creates this groundedness and this regulation. So there's emotional regulation, because remember, we need relationships and connection to help us co-regulate emotionally. And so when they're doing that, I'm seeing that we don't have to do as much de-escalation. So lots of times clients will come in and I'll be working with them, couples, and they are so ramped up, right? And spending the whole session bringing them down. But if they'll just use a few of these skills and tools, they do so much better. Step out of denial. That's what the addict partner can do. And recognize the effect that any of your denial has had on them. I love Rob Weiss's book, Out of the Doghouse. I encourage, the addict partners to read that. It gives them so many great ideas on how to show up for their partner and what to do to support, the betrayed partner. You've got to gain tools and work on tools on helping to assist your partner or support your partner in their betrayal recovery. So what do I mean by that? It means things like knowing how to have safe language, right? Stepping out of denial, really working on empathy. And that's a hard one in the early stages of recovery for an addict, right? They're just learning to recognize they've got shame, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of shame, and they're trying to move out of denial and take full accountability. And then now we're asking them to be able to get down onto that same level and recognize what their partner's feeling when they don't know what they're feeling at times. It's a challenge, but it comes. So if that's your intention, then it's going to shift how you connect in conversation and as you talk with each other. I love the openness and honesty, working on really showing up with vulnerability. I'm telling you that vulnerability piece for the betrayed partners is huge. So if their partner shows up and they're vulnerable, they're willing to be open, they might not even admit they don't know what to do, then that betrayed partner actually feels safer. I find that shame gets in the way. So you've got to learn about your shame, understand it. How does it show up? What does it look like? What does it feel like in your body? Because when you're in it, and we all get into shame, right? We have a fight, flight, or freeze response. So it creates disconnection. And then the other thing is becoming more emotionally engaged. And that shows up in different ways for the partners. It's everything from laughing with me and having a fun date night and not talking about recovery. And it's almost like we're back to how we used to be prior to disclosure discovery, to coming in and saying, I had a really bad day today, and I just want to tell you about it. Are you there to listen to it? So again, showing up with vulnerability and sharing emotionally what's going on, and really engaging, asking, the betrayed partner how they're feeling, and sitting and listening at times when it's hard to hear what they need to say. But all of those things will really help with the repair and create connection. So now what can the betrayed partners do? And I just want a few disclaimers on this. First of all, I really find this came up in group this week. I've had some people who are getting ready to graduate from our groups. And one of the things they've shared is that in the early days of their betrayal trauma, they went to therapists that didn't understand betrayal trauma. and didn't understand what happens to the partner. And some of the advice that they got or the directions they got from their therapist actually added to their betrayal trauma. So I'm telling you, one of the best things you can do is find somebody that you connect with, that's qualified, that understands betrayal trauma through the prodependence lenses. I'm just such a firm believer in that. I just have watched women when they learn the prodependence approach to betrayal trauma. I just see them become more grounded and they can wrap their head around what they're going through. And especially since we're looking at it through that attachment perspective. Oftentimes, the betrayed partner feels like it's the sole responsibility of the betraying addict partner to do all of the attachment repair. And unfortunately, that is not the case. Each partner has some responsibility, and it's going to be a working collaboration. Now, I know lots of times women will come in and see me in the early days and they want to start couples therapy right away. They want to do the attachment and the repair as soon as they can. And yet we've got to get them through crisis first. We got to get you grounded. So our approach where I am at Family Strategies is we have people do individual work. We get them grounded, regulated. I like to get them through formal disclosure. And sometimes they'll go in and they'll see each other's therapists if we have glitches along the way to help them get through and kind of work things out, but not start the deeper recovery work until everybody's regulated. We're working on the repair of the betrayal so that we're not spending all the time in couple sessions just helping you get out of crisis. We call that de-escalation, bringing things down. So we want you to get in there and really do the repair. And it does take two people showing up. And I know that's difficult for the betrayed partner. I hear it all the time. This isn't fair. I'm having to sit here in this group and I didn't cause the problem and I'm not the one who did this. And yet I'm the one who's paying the price and I'm suffering. That's usually what I hear in the first few months of group. When they get ready to leave group and they're graduating, what I'm hearing instead is, I am so grateful for this group. At first, I didn't want to be here, but I just realized that everything I've learned in this group has not only helped my relationship and helped me heal from betrayal, but I'm using it with my kids and I'm using it in everyday life. And these are things I'm so glad I have. I can't imagine life without it. So understand that that is the payoff of having to do some of the work to help, create this healthier attachment. Knowing your areas of focus and what you can do in the meantime while you're waiting for the attachment to be repaired, believe it or not, will help in the overall repair. What does that mean? That means understanding that the early days you're in crisis and what you need to do. Because sometimes in the early days of crisis, partners are very dysregulated. And sometimes their safety seeking isn't as healthy as it should be, especially in the areas I find of anger and rage. So if you can understand that sometimes in crisis, our brain's telling us we're under such severe threat and this disconnection is so bad that it's about, I'm not going to be able to survive, that oftentimes we go into those really intense emotions. So you need to understand relational trauma, how it affects the brain, and then also identify what kinds of relational injuries you might have and how it's showing up in your life. Again, you got to have a therapist that understands this to help guide you and help you recognize this, and then start putting into place the support you need for the crisis. So if you can't turn to your partner, then who can you turn to? Of course, you've got a therapist you can turn to, and I help the women I work with identify who are your other support people. If your partner's not somebody you can turn to right now, they're not safe, or when you do try to turn to them, you dysregulate. So who can you turn to? So we really work on finding at least one person. I like a handful, if not two handfuls, full of people that they can turn to at any given moment for support. And then understanding what crisis is and how it shows up. And then I'll always go back to my 3 pillars. And that is number 1, it is that healthy human connection that I just talked about. Number 2, it's that mindfulness, because remember, I told you how the brain wants to take you back to the past. Go back through the files and try to reorganize and make sense of. So all we have control over is the present moment. So the skills and tools to get you back in your body. And number 3, it's that self-awareness, which I also include self-care. Being aware of when you are triggered, being aware when, you are in your, crazy, I call the monkey mind, right? The constant chatter in your head. and it's triggering you, and then what to do about it. So either reaching out to other people, using your halts: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, all of those, that awareness is very, very helpful. Like I talked about, I really believe support and connection is key. I think this really speeds up. I don't know if speed up is a good word, but it really supports you in moving through recovery. I think at times a little bit easier, and that is when you have a group to go to. When you've got other people that hear your story and there's no judgment, and they're creating that connection with you, and they're helping you be less critical, not only of yourself, but even your situations. They're giving support, empathy. At times, my groups, they do so much processing outside of my groups because they've got their text message and their Marco Polo groups going. And these women are wise. And it's so nice to see that, because what that's also helping them is they're turning to other people to help co-regulate again. And that's what you want to do with your partner. They're also there to provide you the support and to help you with emotional regulation. And then also the other thing is really constantly working on moving through your steps of recovery. So getting the tools and the skills that can help you in any given moment. Having someone there, as far as a therapist, who can help you work on your disclosure. Understanding if there's any underlying trauma that might be contributing to it. Identifying what the betrayal trauma is so you can work on that. And identifying your needs is really important. Working on boundaries, and all of those are kind of really big categories. But I know it feels at times like I'm doing all the work here as the betrayed partner, and this isn't fair. But I promise you that if you stick with it, if you work on your own healing and recovery, that what it's going to do is it's is you and not able to make the way you need in that moment, you have other people to turn to. And there's so many other things. So I would love to hear from everybody that's listening today. If you've got any things that have helped you, maybe when your partner can't connect, what are the skills and tools you've used? Or maybe what have you done to help connect with your partner? I know I work on talking boundary with my clients. We work on communication skills and tools. There's some, just specific things that make all the difference in the world.
So great stuff as always. I'm going back to the top. I love it. Prodependence is, hope and connection, and betrayed partners are hurt physically, emotionally. I mean, like it does happen to them. And as you were just pointing out, it isn't fair. Unfortunately, life isn't fair, so it's like, okay, this is what you have right now, and how do we move forward through it, which I think is what we talk about a lot. Is like, we don't have to be stuck in, we can move forward. The co-regulating, finding a posse of people who are supportive and can help, nurture and care, and you can turn and support too. So it's it's both, but creating that. You've shared before too, like you had different friends that played different roles. If I need accountability, it's this person. If I just need nurturing, it's this person. To have those people that you go, I can count on this person for this, but no one person. I really appreciated too that you talked about, I hear all the time about people going to couples therapy. We need couples therapy, and I'm like, I'm using he and she, but he needs to stop the problematic behavior. And somebody, and I can't remember who, I've used their analogy, and I wish I could give credit to, but they talked about it's like rowing a boat with one oar. The betrayed partner is showing up and they're paddling like crazy, trying to fix the relationship. And the addict, betrayer, isn't able to paddle yet. And so the boat's just spinning around in a circle and not making any progress. And it's so hurtful to the relationship, but to the partner as well. So really getting the support, getting the support for the partner, getting the accountability, and doing the work, for the addict. You talked about shame, and Dr. Rob talks all the time, that shame can be so self-centered for an addict, because it's like, oh, woe is me. Oh, and then partners feel like, well, I can't talk to him because then he goes, I don't want to trigger him and I don't want him to go into shame. So it ends up being further disruption because it keeps them separated. So I've got some questions on the I love that you talked about taking care of themselves. I talk to partners a lot. I talk to everybody a lot, but but I talk to partners and I was like, what do you need to take care of you? When their guys are coming into treatment, I'm like, if he, as soon as he gets on the plane or as soon as you hear that he arrives, what do you need to do for you that isn't focused on his addiction? Like, I mean, like I feel like it's a big treat to go get a pedicure. That's a big deal to me. So like doing something like that, go get coffee with a girlfriend and not talk about him at all. I mean, what do you need to do that is nurturing for you and not focused on his addiction? Because, I really think, that partners get so caught in the trap of having to focus on his addiction. And I know it's safety seeking. I mean, I get all the dynamics, but the more they're able to just go, I just need me. I need to take care of me for the moment. I need to figure out what my boundaries really are. And I think that that's really challenging, for partners as well. The thing I have questions about is you talked about being willing to answer the question, and you gave the example of somebody who's coming up for a formal therapeutic disclosure. And what I hear too often also, so I'd like you to address is, if the partner's going, you need to answer my questions, and then the addict does, even though they haven't gone through formal therapeutic disclosure. And then the poor partner is more traumatized because there isn't the guidance for like, here's the details that you share, the level of details that you share, so that, I mean, the partner now has this imprinted in their brain, they can't get it out. So what are your guidelines for how do you navigate? What do you share? I mean, be truthful, but how do you navigate that?
Well, that's a very good question, because oftentimes when I first see a betrayed partner, I throw this out there in the very beginning as a therapist. Here is what your brain's going to want to do. And that's how that's the phraseology I use, because it's true. The brain is wanting the partner to ask all these questions. I got to know everything. I got to put it together in my mind, right? I'm trying to file this away in my hippocampus. So I need all these details, but I also need all these details because now I'm going to maybe do some other safety seeking and go sure and make sure that the emails line up or financial records line up. And so I talk about safety seeking, and we talk about that through the Prodependence lens. So one of the things I really challenge my clients in doing is not asking all those questions, because they know they're going to do disclosure. And okay, so if you ask that question and you hear something really hard, what are you going to do? And so in that moment, we start identifying what are your resources, because it might not be something you know about, and it might not be something you really want to hear, and you might not have the ability, the capacity to hear it yet. And you know me, I love that willingness capacity buckets. And so we talk about what's your capacity right now? How full is your capacity bucket? You're in crisis. You're having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, right? Because there's so much overwhelm, and you're getting through your day and you're starting to do a little bit better. And then the minute you go in and you ask a hard question and you get this data, and it's going to just take you right back. And I call it down the rabbit hole. Is it worth going down the rabbit hole? And oftentimes my clients will come in and they'll say to me, Debbie, I went down the rabbit hole. Here's what I did. Okay. How did you get out? Who did you turn to? Right. So I try to put together some type of a plan in the early days that they understand. You can ask those questions, but do you realize that this, and this could happen? Okay. And if it does, what are you going to do? So I try to empower the betrayed partner that way to some degree. And then again, if they're in a group, they have their group they can turn to. They can always get in and see me if it takes them, way out of balance and they're way down that rabbit hole and they can't get out. But I like to make that a topic of conversation pretty early on, in counseling, so they recognize that while it's safety seeking, there's healthier safety seeking. And so that's where, and I know we've talked about this in the past, I really work with them on the 3 circles. That's the only thing I like from some of the other recovery work. And I love, okay, here's my healthy behaviors in my outside circle, right? That'll keep me in recovery, keep me grounded, keep me in my body, all that. Then I've got those middle circle behaviors that are as a, the safety seeking, that I'm knowing if I'm getting into it, that, maybe I'm a little out of balance. And then I have my inner circle that are kind of my bottom lines. I'm not going to do that safety seeking. So that could be raging. That could be interrogating and questioning a lot, because I know it's not going to do me good. That eventually I'm going to hear it all in disclosure. And eventually, I will have all that data. Is that helpful?
Yes, yeah, it is. I appreciate the clarification. And, I also heard you say, I asked them to bring, like, instead of asking the question to the betrayer first, bring them to you so that you can talk about it and make sure they're included on formal therapeutic disclosure. And then if you've done formal therapeutic disclosure with the right people, you have a plan for if something else comes up, you have the ability to go, these are the kind of questions that, we can ask, or we'll do this in our couple session, or you'll have a plan. So I think that is, that is really helpful. We encourage highly, our clients and their partners while they're in treatment, news, weather, and sports, and because there's too much stuff that's volatile, and then it gets into problems for both people. And so the more it's news, weather, and sports, not talking about I had this big discovery in treatment. I mean, like, we try to create a safety for both people in treatment. I had another question too. I know you talked this week for safety I need, this week for support I need, and you talked about people stepping into that. How do you make sure that what you're asking for is realistic? Like, for support, I'm asking for you to, I want you to tell me everything, or tell me everything. I mean, how do you frame it? And then, if it's a realistic thing, like it's a good one, and the person just can't step into it, what do you do? Like, so, 2 scenarios. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
Okay.
perfect sense. So a lot of times, by the time we get clients to this point where, and couples, to where they are doing check-ins, they're into recovery a little bit. So at that point, as I've worked with the betrayed partners, they're understanding, okay, here's what I can do in my recovery. I need to let my partner do this in their recovery. And so I will work with them on what are the appropriate things to ask for, as far as I need this for safety, right? It might be, what I need for safety this week is if I come to you and I'm frustrated, that you just sit and listen, right? You don't get angry with me. You don't, would you be willing to do that? So I love the fact that we're making the request and ask, is that something you're able to do for me? And sometimes we have to learn to communicate that. Sometimes we ask for our partners, the betraying partners will say, yeah, I'll do that. And then they don't. So what do you do? That's when you've got to have that support system. And a lot of my betrayed partners believe that their only way through recovery is with their addicted partner, the betraying partner, and they don't think that they should turn to other outside people. And that is something that is going to really get in the way of moving forward in recovery. Because the fact of the matter is, the addicted partner oftentimes cannot be there to meet your needs. So that is the reality. And sometimes the request you have is not a valid request. It is maybe you controlling their recovery. It could be they don't have maybe even the willingness, but their capacity bucket's still pretty low. They're just learning that. So oftentimes I really kind of school and teach my my betrayed partners on how to ask for that and what that looks like and how to do it. I love the talking boundary, because we make vulnerable requests rather than demands, or, making these really hard boundaries. So.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So, so we have a question, and somebody put something in the chat too. So we'll start with the chat. What do you suggest for dealing with an SA spouse who is refusing to admit affair when I found over 100 new items in home after working out of state? And when hubby came in twice a month, we did marriage helper, affair recovery, etc. Financial infidelity as well. I think SA is sober and is trying to be super sweet. but won't be honest, cries often, goes to celebrate recovery, but no accountability partner, won't admit. Yeah. I'm going like, oh, that's like, I'm going to be super sweet to you. Like, that's like a distraction to me. It's like, oh, I'm going to be super sweet and we're going to not talk about that, but I'm going to be really sweet. So yeah. So what are your thoughts, Debbie?
That's got to be very confusing. I'm going to start with that. As a betrayed partner, I would feel like, okay, but they're being so sweet to me. Maybe they're in recovery. Maybe things are good. Then why don't I feel better? Why don't I feel like I can move towards this person and feel safe and secure with them? Because it does go deeper, right? I know we can do some, we can do some work through some of those marriage type classes, but I'm a firm believer in, I believe in with addiction, there's something at the root of it. And until we get to the root of it, right, you don't understand what drives you into addiction and what your addiction style is and what precedes it and the behaviors you go into and your shame. Sometimes our shame will even make us be super sweet, because I just don't want to be seen as a bad guy. And so I want to be seen as a loving husband. And I know I've hurt you and I don't want you to hurt anymore. But yet I'm kind of in denial about the work that I need to do. And so that's a very difficult case. I would encourage you to find somebody who's a CSAT, find a therapist to kind of work on your stuff, whether he's working deeper or not. Here's what I have found. I have had several women who have come in and done recovery on their own. And as they're doing recovery, their partners start to see shifts and changes in them. And the next thing you know, they're in recovery. They're coming in to see a therapist or they're joining, our outpatient program, for addiction recovery. That's not always the case, but regardless, it'll help you to become more aware of the boundaries you can set, more aware of understanding the pattern of addiction. I always teach my betrayed partners about the pattern of addiction. We do that in our program as well. So you recognize, and so I think for you, it's understanding relational trauma, the betrayal trauma, understanding what your needs are, and the boundaries you need to put into place on those needs, because there's got to be some repair done too. And sometimes going to a marriage course on infidelity, that's helpful, but have we gone deep enough? Is your partner actively in recovery so that you can see that they're gaining the skills and tools they need personally so they don't go back into the cycle, into the behaviors, into those patterns again. And so again, I encourage you, work on yourself, figure out what your boundaries are, what your needs are around this. And it's going to be hard. That's why you need the support of, a therapist or a group to help you kind of be able to verbalize and put into place and sit in the discomfort of holding to those boundaries. I do think, some of those SA and CR groups are great, but they don't go deep enough. They're more of a spiritual support, to me, where they're not getting into that therapeutic piece. And I find that you got to have that deeper therapeutic piece to, to really support recovery efforts.
And I don't know, I will own, I've never been to a Celebrate Recovery group. My experience tangentially is that they're typically once a week because they're talking about addiction more often, like alcohol, chemical, less often, sex addiction specifically. I say this often, no addict is going to change as long as we just don't until we can't get away with it any longer. And it's not on you to put healthy boundaries to make us do something. It's what do you need for your safety? Your boundaries are for your safety. And I hear financial infidelity, all of this other, and he is not doing anything to develop, trustworthiness, checking off a box of like, I went to a meeting. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and it's like even going to the best, CSAT therapist once a week for 50 minutes, if that's the only thing that someone's doing, they're never going to get it. They just can't. This is too much. It's too complex. I mean, I've got 2 pages of notes on one little piece of this puzzle that Debbie's, talking about. So looking at all of this, addicts, we need a lot of help. All of the things, the inability to step into vulnerability, the inability to be truthful with ourselves as well as you. We can learn. We we I we can learn, but we need a lot of help and support. And the first thing I read though was the distraction of like, oh, if I'm really sweet to you, then you're gonna, like it's like the Wizard of Oz, don't look behind the curtain kind of thing. And you'll just get over it because like, oh look, he's being sweet. What do you need for you for healthy boundaries? I love what Debbie's talking about too with the three circles. What do you need for your health? What do you need to not focus on and for your safety? So you're not alone. I'm so glad you're here. No one gets the instructions on, oh, and then in this year you're going to figure out that your partner that you thought was trustworthy, I mean, you're going to have discovery, and it's so hurtful and painful, but nobody has an owner's manual on how to do that. So this is the stuff that we do is here to help guide, from professionals, not um, Dr. Google is what I want to say. So anyway, okay. So next question. This is in the Q&A. My porn addict, sex addict husband is in full anger, resentment, and hatred of me. He believes I deserve to be cheated on and more. I just won't give up on him. We have 2 tiny children and I love him. He's been out of the house for 9 months, not in recovery. Do you see this kind of hate and rage? Is there hope still if we can get a CSAT?
Okay, that's a big one. Couple of things that I first want to say is that must be a very powerless place you're in. And I imagine because you love him so much, it hurts deeply too, right? Because you so want that connection. And as a betrayer, with addicts that have that anger, resentment, and hatred, and when they're saying those things like that, that there is a deep level of shame. And we know that shame is one of the roots of addiction. And so, unfortunately, when somebody is in shame, they get so defensive. And sometimes that defensiveness, right? It's that fight response, that limbic response. And again, when you're in addiction, you're working out of the limbic part of your brain. That's where addiction resides, is in those areas. There's such a disconnection, to the prefrontal cortex, that logical reasoning, emotional regulation, empathy, all we have to be connected to this part of our brain. So at this point, he's not operating from that part of his brain. And the unfortunate thing is that you cannot do anything at this point to probably get him into recovery. My guess is, based on if I were to read between the lines, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you've approached him to try to do the repair and repair the attachment here, that eventually he gets to anger and resentment, hatred, and says those things to you. And so at this point, really, again, when I see hatred and rage and addict partners saying these things to the betrayed partners, to me, it's underlying shame. It's either that or they're still acting out, and because they're acting out, they've got shame, or they've got shame when they think about what they've done in the past, right? And so it's this real vicious cycle. And it's really hard for you as a partner. You're not able to get them out of it, unfortunately. And you can't manage your shame either. That's another thing that I've talked about in my groups. And that is sometimes betrayed partners, they try to somehow enlighten their partners that are in their shame, or tell them they're in their shame, help them out of it. And you can't. That's up to him to do. At this point, my recommendation is you get in and you see a CSAT therapist so that you've got somebody that you can talk to, that you can understand what's going on. They can give you the support you need, the skills and tools, give you direction. Because at this point, based on where he's at, sometimes I have to gently guide the betrayed partners through the possibility and the reality that if your partner isn't in recovery, you might have to make a hard decision. As much as you love them, right? Sometimes it might not be a healthy, safe situation to be in. So safety is my number one concern with the betrayed partners that I see, making sure you're safe. And so in his anger and his hatred and resentment for you, I hope that you're safe. I encourage you, get your healthy support people, get those people you can turn to, because it's a very lonely journey when your partner isn't in recovery. And it's very hard. I think betrayal recovery is hard when you don't have somebody alongside you who's created the attachment wound in you and they're not doing anything to help repair it. That's really, really hard. Now, should your partner eventually decide, you know what, I do have a problem here and I need to get help and I need to get in to see a CSAT and start focusing on me, to me, that kind of raises the hope indicator. But right now we got to look at the reality of, if he's not in recovery, then right now you're kind of staying where you're at, 9 months out of the house. He hasn't done recovery. Maybe for you, it's time to, like, I think Tammy said earlier, focus on yourself. Start working on, what do I need right now, here in this moment, to get grounded, to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel supported, to get through this day, to get through this week, through this month, and then start working on your own healing. It's amazing to me when betrayed partners come in, even in situations like you're in, that when you have the right kind of help, how it regulates you so quickly, it empowers you, and it will help you to be able to deal with, this really difficult situation.
So I'm struggling because I think of your kiddos too. Can't believe I'm going to say this, but I was in a previous relationship and had a young child, and she said, "Daddy mad at you again, mommy," and she was 2, and I was like, "This is what I'm modeling for my daughter," and it was this like, is this if I'm choosing this, which this is not a judgment. I can't believe I'm sharing this, but that was one of those really big moments for me. I had to really look at what the relationship was, what the potential was. That person did not want to change. He did not. He blamed me. So I get all this stuff. I was the problem, and so I had to make a hard choice, and gratefully I did it. I changed. I did a lot of work on me because I really needed to find out who I was again. And I'm married for decades to an amazing man who's a real partner and has been, an amazing father to her and modeled good relationship. So whatever your journey is, please take care of you. Please take care of those kiddos, because they deserve to have, you healthy, and you are not the problem. His addiction is, and I hate, I hate that for you. So sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that vulnerability, because, when we hear things like that, Tammy, it helps us really connect, right? And it takes us to a place where we go, wow, here is somebody who was in that same situation I was in, and look where she's at today. And to me, that is what grateful. I want to offer. That's what I want to offer the women that I work with, is that I have been where you're at, and there is sunshine on the other side, as bleak and as dark as it is now, right? There is always hope, whether you're in the relationship with that person who's got the addiction or not. There's always hope, and you can't do it alone. We all need to connect. We all need other people. We are wired for that. And whether it's our partner or not, we still need those people we can turn to who are safe and secure. And I love the fact that you provided your daughter with a whole different future, because you
absolutely, yeah. I mean, it absolutely, and she has acknowledged that. And I wish my ex, only good things in life. I mean, like I'm in a great place. I want, I want everybody to have that. So there's no animosity, but it was a hard choice. But her, I mean, like, I can still quote it: "Daddy mad at you again, mommy." Like, I mean, I just stopped dead in my tracks. So I was like, wow, is this what I would choose for her? And I was like, not at all. So anyway, so, okay. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you everyone for today, and we'll be back next Friday. So so watch the calendar, because there's a few things happening where the calendar isn't going to be as consistent in the upcoming months. So pay attention to the calendar, please. We don't want to disappoint, but we also have some vacations and time away and things like that. So we're doing our best, but there will be some missing meetings. So, but thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank
Talk
you.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.